The Greek youth, Kouros, or New York Kouros, there's lots of terms for it, is created out of marble. So we've moved from the bronze of the Apollo to the marble of the Kouros. And we saw the Lady of Akshur in marble as well. And this is probably a funerary statue, a grave marker, a representation of the deceased. Not an unusual idea in the ancient world. We see a face that is very triangular. It almost has features of the Minoans and the Cycladic peoples involved, although we have these oversized eyes that are very reminiscent of what we saw in the ancient Near East, Egypt, and elsewhere. We see a very slim waist, although not quite the pinched waist that we saw from the Minoans. And we see an interesting pattern in linearity. What do I mean by this? I mean, as we look at the form, a lot of this, for example, the base of the pectorals, or this center line, or the top of the abdomen, or the girdle, this line that runs from the iliac crest, this top of the hip, down into the pubic bone. These are all very linear. They read as if, or we see them, as if they were simply incised lines. The same happens, as I go back, because I'm skipping forward here, in the legs. In the knees and the shins. It looks very, very similar to other pieces we've seen. And he's stepping forward. This is known as contrapposto, or an attempt at contrapposto. So this is a standing form where the weight rests on one leg, freeing the other leg, which is typically bent at the knee. Now, contrapposto is actually altering the weight, and we haven't quite gotten there yet. He is stepping forward quite a bit, and they're starting to develop that idea. We also see a strong Egyptian influence. Looks very much like our statue of Khafre that we saw a couple of times in the Old Kingdom. The difference is he's carved entirely in the round. The hair, again, very, very stylized, and he's liberated from the stone. If we look at the canon of proportion, you'll see that he matches Egyptian canon of proportion very, very well. So they are borrowing from the Egyptians quite heavily here. Again, not surprising. You're trying to create a new visual language, and you're going to borrow from known past exemplars before you start creating something that is new. We never create something new as humans out of nowhere. We always stand on the shoulders of giants. The piece is liberated from the stone. The process that they would have used is very similar to what you might have used if you did carving in soap or whatever other material in an art class in grade school or high school. And so they would have drawn on the front and the side of the block. They would have chipped away slowly, which is why we get this very rectangular form. They aren't quite pushing it to the point of rounding everything out and looking at it as something that's going to be more lifelike. It is nude, which is not surprising, and he fits right about there. If we look at our development of the Kouros form, he fits very early on in that development. So we do see this progression over time, a progression that we'll look at again in a little bit.